Buddy, thanks for joining today. Looking forward to it. It looks like we got a few people coming in. For those who are already here, my name is Alex Cook. I'm an account executive here at Klue, and looking forward to moderating this session today. Big Kyle Coleman fan. While we're getting started, though, I'll do a bit more formal introduction once we get closer to Kyle's debut, but would love to understand where is everybody tuning in from. Maybe drop me a note in the chat in terms of where you are and what your favorite session has been so far. Chelsea, Quebec. So fun fact for those other than Connor and myself, I am from a small town called Wakefield, Quebec, about 10 minutes from Chelsea, Quebec. That's about 25 minutes north of downtown Ottawa. And I was in the previous session with Kevin Dorsey and Jacob on my team. And they were asking people to share their favorite sports team. And I didn't have the heart to drop Ottawa Senators in the chat out of pure embarrassment. But if we do have any other Ottawa Senators fans, would love to hear from you. Matt, are you an Ottawa fan? I see that you're dialing in from Ottawa. Okay. It looks like we have a few more people dialing in here. Everybody would love to, we're going to hold off on introductions for another minute or so, but would love to understand where everybody's dialing in from, and would love for everybody to share their favorite sessions so far. So we've had a lot of cool stuff. I've been having the time of my life the last couple of days, and would love to hear what's resonated with everybody else. Matt, that is good news for you. Liv, I was also on that session. Big fan. Likewise, Taylor. I will, just to kind of set the tone for today so today's session with Kyle Coleman, really excited about it. I'm going to introduce him here in a second. I did have a sneak peek into the conversation and the content that he's going to be sharing today, and his philosophy, his approach on prospect experience, point of view, and where competitive intelligence fits into the mix really lines up with me as an account executive, and I'm sure for the leaders here in sales enablement, product marketing, and really anybody responsible for working with sales on competitive enablement. I think there's a lot of takeaways we're going to get from this. Also really like the Cisco session, Connor. Okay, and one thing just to do some housekeeping here. You're probably used to this by now, but if this is your first session, make sure to go to the top right corner of your screen and click speaker session. Kyle is a big fan of interactive conversation. So throughout the session will be a little bit different than what you may have experienced with others. He's going to be fielding questions throughout and keeping an eye on the chat during the conversation. So drop notes in the chat, drop Q&A. I will be monitoring that as well. We can leave some time at the end for more formal Q&A, but he is going to be looking for your help guiding the conversation. So please do hop to speaker session and drop in anything you're supposed to, or you're looking to hear from him today. Okay. Looks like we got quite a few people dialed in now. We'll give Kyle another minute in classic sales fashion. 1 minute late to the conversation, but as soon as I see him pop up here, really looking forward to introducing him. For those who have just joined the conversation, my name is Alex Cook. I am an account executive here at Klue. Been here a little bit over a year. Had the chance to speak with Kyle before today's conversation. Really excited, for me in particular, about his point of view on prospect experience and where competitive intelligence fits into formulating a point of view when you're breaking into accounts and navigating throughout a sales cycle as well. Some really good insights that have come from that, and looking forward to hearing about them. Likewise, Connor. Looking forward to it. I will tell a joke, Rob. I'm happy you asked. So Connor, as I mentioned, is from Chelsea. I'm from Wakefield. Sneak peek into Klue culture here. Our hometowns have a local newspaper, and on the front of that newspaper, there is the worst joke of the week every week. And I've gotten in the habit of sharing that joke every week in our all company Slack channel, and have heard many times that it is people's highlight of the week. Kidding, not one person has ever said that. But the most recent joke that I said yesterday was, why did the marathon runner end up in jail? So if you have any thoughts on the answers to that, drop that in the chat. Eager to see if anybody gets it right. No comments. The answer is for resisting arrest. Get it? Because he was taking a break. It's a good one. I know you're all laughing in silence. Thank you. Okay. Big laughs. We're here. Okay. I can tell we're looking for more of those. So while we're waiting here, I've got another one for you. Today I learned you can turn a canoe over. You wear it as a hat because, finish that sentence. Because it is capsized. Yeah, there we go. The laughs are killing me. It's hard not to hear everyone laughing. Okay, on to another one. What is a monster's favorite breakfast? Anybody? No? Bacon and legs. That's actually one of my favorites. Okay. Give me 1 second here. I'm just gonna ping a colleague. Okay, and looks like we've got Kyle. So very excited to welcome Kyle to the conversation. Gonna let him in now. For those who haven't had the chance to meet Kyle Coleman, big Kyle fan, follow him on LinkedIn, shares a ton of insights, so definitely recommend. A little bit of background on yourself, Kyle. So brief foray into technology sales back in 2013 when he was employee number 6, I believe, at Looker. Built their team from 1 to 60 SDRs and saw them through growth from 100K in annual revenue to over 100 million in annual revenue before getting acquired for Looker, and is now the head of growth and enablement at Clari. And Kyle, I'll let you provide some context to Clari yourself and kick things off. Over to you.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties. I wasn't in the right area of the platform, even though the Klue team prepped me very well for this. So yeah, thank you, Alex, for the intro. As Alex said, I have like 8 or 9 years of experience leading SDR teams, these pre-sales teams that I think have a really unique opportunity to provide competitive differentiation. And I'm going to talk with you about how to do that. This isn't necessarily going to be about how to position yourselves or your product or your company differently to stand out from the crowd, but rather it's about how the experience that you create for your prospects is and can be a competitive differentiator. You, in all likelihood, wouldn't be here unless you had some competitors selling in your space. And so how do you shepherd people through that process? How do you create an experience for your prospects that is different, that adds value, that's actually useful for the people on the other end. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So as we talk about this, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat, and please do ask questions in the chat as we go here. I only have, I think, 2 slides because I want this to be as engaging as possible. I want to create as much of a conversation as possible. And so please do use the chat. Again, if you see me glancing down that way, it's for that reason. So here we go. I'm going to present my slides. Cool. Okay. So this is what I mentioned before. We're talking about how to really create a world-class prospect and buying experience, and how that experience that you create really does serve as a competitive differentiator. So I'm talking mostly about work that SDR teams do and that AE teams do, but this also extends to the work that marketing teams can do, and how you should think about the way that you are setting up your buying process, the way you're setting up your marketing campaigns to create a good experience, a world-class experience for your prospects. So we're going to talk about the mindset that it takes to be successful here. We're going to talk about the work that you have to do as a marketing team, SDR team, as an AE team to really understand the personas that you're selling to. We're going to talk about accounts and why it's so important to actually understand the accounts that you're selling into, beyond just the fact that they just raised a bunch of money, or beyond the fact that they exist in a certain industry. What is it about that account that you can actually provide value to? We're going to talk a little bit about how to execute. So all the different touch points that your prospects experience, you really need to think about how to optimize every single one of those touch points. And then finally, we're going to just hopefully all agree at the end here that if you focus on these things and you do them well, then you really will have separated yourself from the herd, and you will have provided some level of extreme competitive differentiation. I want to say before I get in here, I've mentioned a few different teams. The marketing team, the SDR team, and actually I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. The marketing team, the SDR team, as well as the sales team itself. And what's really interesting about this mindset is that it empowers people to think and act and behave differently. It empowers people to think that they're not just an individual contributor. They're not just a campaign manager or an SDR or an account exec. There's somebody who really is helping your company distinguish itself from the rest of the competitive landscape. They are representatives of your company. I mentioned before, I've been in this SDR orbit for about 9 years or so. And what I like most about it, one of the things I like most about it, is that SDRs are the first interaction many times with a human that the prospect will have. And so the human on the other side of this, they want to have a certain experience. They expect to be treated not like a lead, they expect to be treated like a human. And so thinking about it and putting the onus on the SDR team and empowering them to say, here's how you can create value for your prospects, it's a really great thing. It gets individuals, again, marketing, SDR, sales, gets them thinking differently, behaving differently, and approaching prospect conversations differently. So let's talk through a few of the agenda items that I said here, and we'll start with the mindset. I'm gonna make a bit of a provocative statement. It's not meant to upset anybody in the customer success world. Instead, it's meant to incent the pre-sales world to have a similar mindset. So I talked about the mindset that you have to have, that the prospect experience, the buying experience is a competitive differentiator. And my provocative statement is that we obsess in tech world, B2B tech, SaaS in particular, we obsess over the customer experience. We have a whole team of people that are literally called customer success managers because we care a lot about the customer experience once we have their money. Now, that mindset, that obsession over the experience that you have should extend up the funnel before you have their money into the prospect experience. So what are you doing to make sure that you are just as obsessive over the value you provide, the insights you provide, the experience you deliver in the pre-sales world as you are in the post-sales world, post-implementation? And if you can really think about that mindset, that will then inform all the other things that we're going to talk about today. So creating as much passion and energy and as much expectation that the prospect experience matters just as much as the customer experience is really going to make sure that you're thinking about every touch point you have with a prospect and with a buyer, and every interaction that you have when you're on the phone or your in-person meetings or you're communicating via email. Everything that you're doing is with the buyer experience in mind. And again, this is different. This is hard work, and this separates you from the millions of other people that are trying to get your prospects' attention. So that's the mindset. I'm gonna, again, just look in the chat. I don't see any questions, but as you have questions, please, if anything I say you're curious about or you want me to double click on, the world is your oyster. Please do put some thoughts in the chat there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more tactically now about how can you take this mindset that you have and bring it to life. And I'm gonna start with this concept of persona work. And yeah, Alex just asked a question. We'll get into this in a moment. Katie, that's a good idea. Buyer experience specialists. That really is what they are. They control so much about the prospect's perception of your company. And so a lot of what we're going to talk through, these tactical steps, will help make sure that that mindset is infused across the whole top of funnel SDRs. So let's start with the first tactical item here that I mentioned in the agenda, which is the persona work. Persona is an interesting sort of way that marketing and SDR teams think about the people that they prospect into. It's useful, of course, and you have to know the roles that these people have, the pains that they experience day to day, all these things matter. But you also have to remember that this persona is also a person. That A at the end of the word makes a big difference, and it changes the mindset. So you have to think about them both as a persona and understand their universe, understand their world, but you also have to think about them as a person. And what experience would they like to have? What are they expecting when they come to your website? What are they expecting when they click through an ad? What are they expecting when they're on the phone with one of the members of your team? What are they expecting when they're in a demo? And if you can do both of these two things and ensure that you know what matters to them as a persona, you know what matters to them, what's keeping them up at night, what kind of strategic initiatives they're responsible for, what their main metrics are, what their growth plans are, all those sorts of things matter, what their career development may look like. That's of course very important. You need to make sure that your messaging is aligned with those things. But as I mentioned before, you also have to keep in mind that on the other end of this phone, or the other end of whatever interaction is happening, there are people. And people have different certain expectations. And those expectations are typically pretty high for the type of experience and the type of engagement that you give them. So really challenge yourselves to think about what happens when, let's talk about a marketing circumstance right now. What happens when somebody sees one of your ads on Google or LinkedIn or wherever you're serving ads? What's the experience actually like? If they're seeing an ad and you're advertising, I'll just talk about my company because it's my world, it's a little easier for me. If they see an ad and it's all about forecasting and how sales forecasting is inefficient, painful, et cetera, click here, learn more information. And they come to a landing page and we don't answer those questions. They don't see how Clari can help improve forecasting processes, create more accuracy, create more efficiency, something like that. And instead, this messaging is vague or is about Clari more generally or is about an entirely different set of problems that we solve. That is creating a bad experience. And I know that sounds really basic and some of you may be rolling your eyes at me, but a lot of teams don't get this right. A lot of teams will just say, oh, we got their attention with this ad. Now we're just going to funnel them to a demo page and they're going to request a demo because they're on our demo page and we've optimized this page for conversion. You're thinking, if that is the way that you're thinking about yourself and you're thinking about what's good for you and what's best for you, but you're not thinking about what is best for them or what the expectations are that they have when they click that ad. Now, similarly, and this is much more difficult to do and many companies do not get this right. Let's talk about the handoff between an SDR and an AE. And we'll just keep using the same example. The prospect sees the ad, they click through, they want to understand forecasting pain, they get to this landing page, and it's all about how we can improve your forecasting efficiency, accuracy, et cetera. They fill out the form, great. They have raised their hand, they say, I'm interested. Now, if the marketing team does not pass that information along to the SDR team and say, this person clicked on a forecasting ad, this person is interested in understanding how we can help improve their efficiency and accuracy in forecasting. If that information doesn't get into the hands of the SDR or the AE, who's the first human touch point on that lead, guess what happens? It's a bad conversation. What ends up happening is the SDR comes in with no context or the AE comes in with no context. And they end up having a conversation that makes the buyer, the prospect, kind of roll their eyes and say, hey, look, you should know already what I'm doing here. You should have a sense already of what is happening. And a lot of times those handoffs are totally broken. And now the real handoff that gets really broken here is between the SDR and the AE. And I've experienced this before. This happens probably more often than not, actually, when I'm on the buying side, where I have a conversation with the SDR, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, discovery, qualification, whatever you want to call it. I tell them what I'm looking for. I tell them a little bit about what I feel like is broken. They educate me a little bit on what they can do differently. And I say, great, okay, I'm ready to have a 30, 45, 60-minute demo with your team, whatever it is, a deeper dive. Then I get on the call with the AE. And it's like all the other stuff never happened before. And I end up spending the same 15 or 20 minutes with the AE having the same exact conversation. And I'm like, what is going on here? I feel like I know that my time has just been wasted. And so you really have to make sure that your SDR processes, your top of funnel processes are handing things off to AEs, handing off the context to AEs in a useful, standardized, programmatic way so that when they're on the phone call with the AE already knows what's top of mind for me. The AE already knows what the pain points are. And importantly, the AE can show me the things that solve this in the demo. Because that, again, keep continuing to go down the funnel here. Another thing that happens is that, yeah, Alex, exactly. I already explained this. I feel like you're wasting my time. And now, if I feel like you're wasting my time and you're about to show me the demo of the product, how open-minded do you think I'm going to be about the demo I'm about to see? I'm going to enter that demo with a little bit of skepticism, or maybe a good deal of skepticism. And I'm going to be just much less receptive to the messaging that you're trying to show me in that demo. So now let's imagine marketing team hands off information to SDR, contextually goes well, discovery call, SDR to AE, that discovery is all well handed off and the context is there. The AE handles the front part of the call really well, awesome. But then they show the demo and the demo is not about forecasting. The demo is about something else that we do, and we do a bunch of other things. But if the AE is showing me something that is not super top of mind, they haven't earned the right to show me this other part of the product. And so this is all part of the prospect experience that you need to really think about. And so we're talking about, again, this whole concept here is the persona that you're talking to, the person that you're talking to. You may think that the persona should care about this element of your product, and you may be right, but the person doesn't yet care about this because they have competing priorities. They have something that's top of mind. They already know what they're interested in, and you have to show them that you can solve this first problem, this brightest burning fire that they have, to earn the right to show them the next layer of your product and then the next thing that you can solve and continue the conversation. So that is why understanding the persona, thinking about them as a person, why this really, really works. I'm going to pause there so that I can look through the commentary. And again, if you have questions about anything that I just said, please put them in the chat so that I can try and respond to it. Okay, Suman Melville, great question. She says, I love that you're focused on prospect experience. What are some effective ways you hand off and share internally from prospect to post-sale experience? Prospect to post-sale experience. So I haven't even touched this part, but that pre-sales to post-sales implementation handoff, so to speak, is super important. And there's no easy way to do this, Suman. So all of these handoffs that I talked about, they all require effort and they all require intent. And if you're not effortful, if you're not intentional about how to do these things, then they're not going to happen. And so from an enablement standpoint or from a process creation standpoint, it's really important to be thoughtful about the templates that you're creating. What information matters? And how are we capturing it? And how are we communicating that to whoever is next in the chain, this family of people that's handling this prospect or handling this customer? And a lot of it can and should be done right inside of your CRM. And I know that sounds like a really obvious answer. A lot of this is really obvious, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's simple. And so templatize what you expect the marketing team to hand off to SDR, SDR to AE, AE to implementation, implementation to customer success. If you can really have, the top 3 or 5 bullet points of marketing the SDR, where did this person come from? What were they searching for? What prior engagements did they have? SDR to AE, what have we already discussed if we had a live phone call? What is top of mind for them? What is the pain points that they expressed in that phone call or via email if we exchange emails? AE to implementation, what are the value points that we need to be focused on? What are they expecting in an implementation? What is like I said before, the brightest burning fire that they believe that they know our product can solve? Why are they buying the product? And then implementation to CS, continuation of enablement. Here's the thing that matters most to them. Here's what we did in implementation. Here's the technical structure of the product. And now here are the things that you need to focus on in your mid-year reviews and your executive reviews and all the things that make sure that they see that we're delivering on the value that we promised them all the way upstream. So a long answer, Suman, and again, probably a relatively obvious one. But if you can be really, really clear about the information that you expect to be handed off to every team, and if you have a place, a field in your CRM for that information to be captured, you're doing a lot right. It's more than half the battle. Now, if you can figure out how to automate some of this, how to make sure that information is flowing from your various systems, from Marketo to Salesforce, or from your conversational intelligence tool back into Salesforce, or whatever it is to inform these notes fields, more power to you. But to get things started at first, it can and should be a pretty manual process. Okay, looking at other questions here. Talking about handoff, Taylor Morgan asked, what's your take on full cycle sales versus having split teams? It's a really good question, Taylor. I think there's no one size fits all answer to this question, because I think it depends largely on what you're selling and how complex the sales cycle is. I think that there is a time and a place for a pretty robust division of labor. Obviously, like I said, have been in SDR land for 9 years, so I believe in the SDR model. However, that's because the companies that I've been working for have been relatively complex sales cycles that are relatively long and selling a relatively complex B2B product. If, however, I were selling a more transactional product where the sales cycle was a week instead of 3 months, that would change the way that I would answer your question. I think if your sale is more transactional and it can be handled by a single person, then it should be handled by a single person. I think as long as, and again, back to the theme of why we're here, the prospect experience, if every touch point is actually adding value to that person, that's a pretty good case to be made that it's useful. So we talk about we've talked a lot about the personas, or the internal people on your team that are involved here. The SDR needs to be trained and enabled to actually have valuable conversations. They need to be trained to actually show the product if they need to show the product, not necessarily to give an hour-long sales engineer quality demo. That's maybe an expectation that's too high, but they should be able to show a 5-minute demo. They should be able to pop into the product and show a feature or two, a capability or two. They should be able to do those things so that if the buyer asks for that, which they do, they can do it. They can flex into that. So it largely depends on your sales cycle, Taylor, and it largely depends on what you're selling. But my blanket answer is, as long as every touch point is adding value, you're doing something really right. Okay, Jenny says, we have persona cards, but they collect dust more often than not. That is the case. You should use Klue. Any tips on rolling them out to make sure that the sales team uses them? The tips that I would have for you, Jenny, and this is the case for a lot of folks, the marketing teams, product marketing teams, they blood, sweat, and tears into these persona cards. And they're almost always extremely useful, but they're also almost always way too much information. Like, reams and reams of paper that are, like I said, useful information, but if you put yourself in the shoes of the salesperson is almost always looking for something specific or looking for a high level answer to something. And so you need to have, I think the answer, anyway, the way that we try and approach it here at Clari is we try and have 2 different versions of this. We have the in-depth answer that gives everything you could ever possibly want to know about a persona. And then we have the quick hitting stuff. And the quick hitting stuff is typically pain point that they experience, how we solve that pain point. And so that is the way that we try and have it both ways. And then so we have, we take this persona battle card that's, way too many words, and we try and distill that down into a single slide, a single table that is 2 columns, literally. It is pain point, how we solve it. And if you can deliver both of those things, the high level view and then the double click view, I feel like you're going to make things a little bit more useful to your sales team. There's also a drumbeat that has to happen where you're constantly updating and sharing or resharing that information. So have some sort of cadence where, every quarter or every 6 months maybe, where you're going back and you're checking your work. Hey, we may have defined that persona 6 months ago. Is that still right today? And let's make some updates and let's reshare it in whatever channel you have. If it's Slack or email or Klue, if there's a way for you to share that persona or that competitive information to keep it up to date, and make sure that your sellers know that there's something new that they're going to be learning, a new customer story, a new insight, a new capability that your product has. That's how you ensure that you keep people engaged, I think. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading through a couple more questions. Okay, Jacob has a good question here. Jacob, I think of Klue, Jacob Jebberwald. You're prospecting a new account that already uses a competitor. How do you recommend marketing teams and salespeople prospect for displacement? So this isn't necessarily the theme of what I want to talk about today, but it is a nice segue into kind of the third component that I want to talk with you about. We talked about mindset, we talked about persona work. The third component is account work. So how do you go beyond the firmographic information of an account? How do you go beyond the demographics of the account and actually understand that account well enough to add differentiating value? And I think that this is a really useful way for you to displace competitors. When you're doing account research, a lot of the work that individuals do, and this is true for account-based marketing teams, sales development teams, AE teams, a lot of the work they do that is very high level. It's, you're in this industry, you have this number of employees, you have this number of potential licenses that I can sell to you. Maybe I'll do a cursory glance at your 10K if you're a public company, or maybe I'll look at I'll look at your website and try and understand a little bit more about what you do. You have to go deeper than that. You have to go deeper than that to understand what we call strategic initiatives. Strategic growth initiatives is what we call them at Clari, because we're helping companies largely grow revenue and focus on revenue. But more broadly, strategic initiatives that they're trying to pursue. What are the things that really matter to the VP and C-level people at this business? And I have a hint for you. The things that really matter are not the features of your product. They're just not. So what you need to do is you need to take those features of your product and you need to figure out how to tie them into those strategic initiatives. So this company is rolling out a new product line. This company is expanding internationally. This company is making a shift to a new revenue model. This company is doing something, making a key strategic hire. Whatever these things are, you need to understand what the strategic initiatives are of companies that you sell to and how you support them. Okay, I'm going to reiterate this because I think it's really, really important and really differentiating. For the people on this call, if you take some time to really think through the high-level strategic initiatives that your product, your solution, your service helps support, that's step one. You really need to think it through categorically. What are the top 5 things? Don't boil the ocean. You don't have to know every single thing about everything that you're trying to do, or everything that you're helping companies with, rather. But get the top 5. And it may be some of the things that I just mentioned. This company is expanding internationally. They're going to be hiring 50 people for the first time in APAC. What can our company do to help companies that are undergoing international expansion? Something like that. Brainstorm. Sit down with some of your sellers. Understand what kind of conversations they're having. Sit down with your customer success team. Understand the conversations that they are having about what's top of mind for their VP and C-level people. And boil it down to a top 5 and start there. Now, the next step is you have now this top 5 strategic initiatives that you think your company helps support. Now, how do we do it? Let's build that connective tissue between the features or capabilities of your product or of your solution and how they're tied to those strategic initiatives. And if you build that out, the next step, of course, is building messaging to take to the market, to arm your sellers with in their meetings, their live meetings that they have, maybe even to infuse it into your pitch deck, to build outbound sequences around these things. So now your SDR team, your marketing team, your AE team, you're not just focused on the capabilities that you have. You're not just focused on forecasting accuracy and efficiency, as I mentioned before about Clari, but rather you're saying, this company just hired 50 new salespeople over the last 12 months. How are they going to ensure that the processes that were working so well for them today or a year ago are going to work for them today? We need to, instead of talking about forecasting efficiency as a capability, we need to up-level that a little bit and say, you're experiencing hyper growth right now. In order to grow as efficiently and as effectively as you expect to, as your investors expect you to, you need to make sure that your forecasting processes are standardized across all 50 of these new people who you just hired in the last 12 months. Here's how we can make it happen. And so it's not necessarily us talking about the capabilities that Clari has. It's us ensuring that we are showing that we know and we care about what your company is going through and how we can help you. The higher up the seniority ladder that you're prospecting into, or that you're marketing to, or that you're selling to, the more you need to be focused on these strategic initiatives, and the less you need to be focused on the how your company actually does what they do, the features of your company. So that account work is extremely important. And I can basically guarantee you that if you do this well, you will put yourself in a really good position to displace or deposition your competitors. Because in all likelihood, your competitors are focused on this feature battle. And so then when you're having the head-to-head conversation of us versus competitor X, it's not necessarily about a feature comparison. It's about you understanding what the company is trying to make happen over the next 1, 2, 5 years and how you're going to help them do that. As opposed to the other company who is probably just focused on delivering or talk tracks around what features they have, what capabilities they have. So that account work is really, really important. And just to summarize, strategic initiatives, your features, and how your features feed into and enable those strategic initiatives. Okay, I hope that was helpful, Jacob. Okay, looking through questions. Sorry, y'all, just paging through.
Hey, Kyle, I summarized some of the questions for you. So one that came up was, if a prospect has priorities or pains around specific areas of a workflow, does it make sense to show the whole workflow together, or start with what that prospect wants to see first, then circle back on how it fits into the broader workflow?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for summarizing. I'm not sure who asked that. It's a really good question. I would say put yourself in the shoes of that buyer and think about what you would expect. If you're the buyer and you have things that are top of mind, if you expressed that those things are top of mind, and it's part of a workflow, but it's not the whole workflow. What would you expect to see if you were the buyer? You would probably expect to get your questions answered first, and then explore the whole workflow. So that's always the mindset that you should have. That's always the lens that you should put things through, is what would I expect to see? What would I like to see if I were in the buyer's shoes? And then deliver an experience that maps to that. So it takes a little bit of, it takes effort, as I said before, and it takes intent, and every situation is in all likelihood going to be different. And so that is one of the hardest things about this, is that no two prospect engagements are exactly the same. And so you need to build flexibility into your engagement model to say, Mr. or Mrs. SDR, Mr. or Mrs. AE, you need to be able to respond to scenarios. You need to be able to capture this information that we've passed along to you and act or behave or think differently to deliver a different experience, related, but different experience to prospect A and prospect B, who have similar but different viewpoints on what is top of mind for them. And then once you solve that first thing that's top of mind, then you can get into the more persona-based workflow that is a comprehensive answer to the full thing that they're trying to solve for. Okay, recommendations on how to reduce redundant discovery for a company that sells through channel. That's really hard. I think so. Channel sellers, the handoff is sometimes a little bit harder to standardize, but I think you just have to do whatever the best you can. And a similar answer that I gave before, which is structuring and templatizing the information that you expect to be handed off from one team to another, and just getting on the same page with the leadership of those two different teams to say, here's the information that we need in order to create a seamless prospect experience. We know that 9 times out of 10, your team is already capturing this, and we don't want to have redundant, we want to make the best use of the prospect's time, and we don't want to have redundant conversations. So please, here, and here, or deliver this piece of information here, and here in your handoff to us, whether that's in a partner portal or the CRM or via email or whatever it is. You can standardize and templatize that in every one of those cases, and just make sure that as frequently as possible, you're getting the information that you need to run as effective a call as possible. Okay. Discovery in a way that depositions competitors, very similar to the question that I answered for Jacob. If you really understand their strategic initiatives and you really understand how your company supports those initiatives, then you can start talking to different people, and I'll get to that in a second. You can start talking to different people with that language, and you can talk about the strategic initiatives you know they have, and the discovery is less about the immediate pain that you're solving and more about what's blocking them, or what's worrying them, or the anxiety that they may have about realizing these longer term strategic initiatives. Now, I need to say something about this because it's really important to bear in mind. And I alluded to this before, but this goes back to the understanding your personas really well. VP and C-level people in particular are going to have they're going to care way more about these strategic initiatives than would an individual contributor on the team or a frontline manager on the team. They have a different set of things that they're worrying about day to day. They have a different set of pains, different set of focus areas. So trying to have a longer term strategic conversation with somebody who's disconnected from that company strategy is not a recipe for success. So you need to stratify your personas in that way and really understand, we know that this account strategic initiatives are this, but we also know that the personas who care about it are this and this. But so when we're engaging with the other personas that are a little bit lower on the seniority ladder, we don't necessarily need to focus on those strategic initiatives, but rather we can focus on the features, the capabilities, the things that we know is going to make their life a little bit easier. So it's really important to combine these two things that we've talked through: the persona work that you do, the understanding that you have, understanding your buyers as a persona, but also as a person, and the account work that you do, the strategic initiatives for the more senior people, the capabilities, the pain points that you solve for the less senior people. And you need to be able to flex into those different conversations and flex into different demo flows and different outbound tracks and different marketing activities. So really important that you really think about optimization for different levels of seniority within the same account. So again, this is hard. This is hard. And there's a reason that it's differentiating. It's differentiating because it's hard. If it were easy to do, everybody would be doing it and we wouldn't be here talking about it. It's hard to do, but it's worth the effort because it's creating a prospect experience where you show them that you actually know them and that you actually care about what is going on in their universe and that you have a solution or a mindset or an approach that solves the things that they care about. So it's tactical with respect to how you're handing information off between your internal teams, and it's strategic about how you're planning to have those conversations situationally when they come up with different levels of seniority within and across accounts. Okay, so mindset, persona work, account work. We already talked a little bit about the fourth area here, which is the execution. And the executing these tactics and these strategies that we've talked about infuses every single touch point and every single interaction that you have with any sort of account or any sort of person within that account. And so what I recommend to you is, as you're thinking about what kind of prospect experience are we delivering, you're thinking about this question, it needs to be more than about just the live conversations that you have. And that's what a lot of people will focus on. But you need to go upstream of that. You need to go to how do we show up on our website? Are people that are interested in whatever keywords, whatever SEO or SEM that we're showing up on search engines, are they actually getting what they expect to get when they hit our website? This is a tough question to ask. And a lot of times the mistake that companies will make is they'll optimize their website for what they are most proud of, for what is most important for them, instead of optimizing it to be about the prospect, to be about the buyer, to deliver valuable information to that buyer. Now, the same thing will go as you get kind of one level of maturity, or you increase your level of maturity, which is the personalization that you provide on your site. Again, we'll use this very simple example. If somebody is searching for forecasting, they click that ad, they land on a homepage, and we can customize that homepage to be about forecasting, all the better. So if you can go one step deeper and include that level of real-time personalization, that is really awesome. Now, the same thing is true for the experience that they have on your website. How easy is it for them to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in learning more? How easy is it for them to consume high-value content that your team has created? Is it a form that has 30 fields that they have to fill out? That's not a good prospect experience. Or are you allowing them to easily and quickly access that information so that they can learn more about what your company does, or they can get the thought leadership that your company has published? Make that as easy as possible for them to do. And again, put yourself in their shoes. When you are researching a topic, when you are doing something, do you want the information immediately when it's available? Or do you want to have to go through a form and then have to talk to somebody and then finally get a PDF a day later? Probably the former. So think about this balance between the experience that you're providing and what buyers expect and the lead generation goals that you have. And make sure that the gates that you have on different content are applicable. so that you're creating a buyer experience that actually is useful, while also still satisfying the lead generation goals that you may have, the revenue generation goals that you may have. It's a balance. It's not easy. There's no one size fits all solution. Some companies say, I want people to access as much content, and I want our content to do the work for us, do the talking for us, and interest people and educate people enough so that they come back and they say, I want a demo, and they fill out the request demo form. And so they don't gate any of their content. Other folks go the exact opposite way to say, this content is so valuable. It took so much blood, sweat, and tears. We have to capture people's information. And if that is the camp that you're in, that latter camp, keep your forms as short as possible. Email address, phone number, maybe, and name. And name and email, I think, is probably all that's required these days. Because again, as you think about the follow-on touch points there, you want to make sure that the conversations that your SDR team has with these people, or your AE has with these people, whoever's processing those leads, is actually valuable. So this goes all the way down from the touch points that marketing controls, to the touch points that SDR controls, to the touch points that the sales team controls, and then post-sales as well, and all the handoffs in between. Executing and putting all of these touch points through this lens is really, really important and really hard. So I think that we've sort of belabored that execution point long enough. So that is the majority of what I want to talk through today. And I'll just say the final thing is just the conclusion here about the mindset that this takes, and the fact that this really, truly is differentiating. As I said before, if it were easy to do, everybody would be doing it, but we know that they're not. And so there's an opportunity for you to show up differently, to add value in ways that your prospects maybe don't even expect. So you can delight them with every touch point, marketing, SDR, and sales owned, to really create an effective prospect experience. Alex, hello.
I love it. Yeah, I love that. And one thing that you brought up a lot here in terms of what you're talking about there in the prospect experience, I love the work you're talking about with persona cards, with persona work, with account work, and where that all fits in. Something that Jacob on my team and Kevin Dorsey were speaking about in the previous session was around how great it is when you're prospecting into an account that already uses one of your competitors, because they've decided it's a problem they need to solve. They've invested money in solving it, and they're going to have other problems that you identified. With account work, persona work, and everything you're talking about with the last few minutes, I'd love your point of view on where you see the competitive work fitting into the account work and the point of view and the persona work that you'd be doing.
It's such a good question, and there are certainly ways to infuse it across. And we've touched on this kind of loosely here. Competitive is hard. It's hard to take the high road while also always be responding fully to competitive situations. And you have to make a philosophical decision as a company, which is, do we call competitors out by name, or do we focus on the value that our company brings to the fore? And more often than not, I am a fan of the latter camp, where we focus on the value that our company is bringing, and we show that value instead of telling and responding exactly to, a feature comparison sort of bake-off. We say, look, we've had conversations about what your company is trying to do, and we've shown here's how X, Y, and Z ways that we're going to help you achieve these longer-term goals. And if you can differentiate your way versus competitors by showing how much you can respond to those higher level, more strategic goals, I think that it's not always sufficient. There will always be cases where you're gonna have to get in the trenches and do the feature battles and capabilities battles. But for the most part, if you are focusing on the true value that your company, your solution, your product, whatever it is, that value really is, and how it's attached to those longer term strategic initiatives that the prospect is trying to pursue, that is so differentiating. It's going to change the conversation when you're in a competitive scenario. So not sure if that was a useful answer, Alex.
It was, and completely agree with your approach there. I'm wondering, knowing that you've built teams of SDRs as well, have you ever done anything with that approach where you're taking your value edge? Have you ever seen your teams do anything cool, or whether it's a campaign or a prospecting program, where you're targeting companies that use your competitor with your value edge? So not calling them out by name, but using that value edge that you're talking about. What have you seen work for people that are looking to run that type of program? Absolutely, yes.
So we go kind of upstream of that, Alex. We go a couple steps further. So part of an SDR onboarding and AE onboarding as well is to learn about these strategic growth initiatives and what they are. and to really get certified on an understanding of what they are, as well as how to message against them and how to identify them within an account. If it's a public account, where are you going in their 10K? Where are you going in their public reporting to understand them? If it's a private company, where are you going to understand these things? And now you're certified to hunt for these SGIs, as we call them, strategic growth initiatives. You're certified to message against them, and then you're certified to go and execute. And so if you know that you're wading into a competitive situation, you know that account you're prospecting into already uses a certain competitor, you're not necessarily going and saying the same thing. You're not going and saying, hey, do you already have a forecasting solution? You're going in with a different message that is going to resonate differently with people, with different levels of people, as I said before. And that is, it just creates a completely different approach. So the value that we're bringing early in that conversation is differentiating. And it changes the reaction that we get from prospects who maybe would have said, oh, if we said, hey, we're another forecasting solution, they may have said, oh, thanks, but no thanks, we already have that. Instead, we're saying what I said before, you just hired 50 salespeople going through hyper growth. Here's how we can help you, interested to learn more. It's a very different conversation. It's a very different ask. So we do this, yes, to answer your question, Alex, we do this all the time.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I like the idea of certification. I've definitely been part of teams where somebody really figures out a great way to do what you're talking about, but that just sticks with them and their mindset. So if you can kind of scale that, I like that you're doing it as part of your onboarding experience too. So really, really appreciate that approach. And that
very
helps.
good. I just want to show I'll just show this slide, the takeaway slide, in case anybody wants, I don't know, screen capture or whatever it is. I talk through a lot of this. Again, my presentation style is not really slide based, so apologies if you would have preferred to have more of these slides, but this is the summary. And if you can keep these principles in mind, and then if you go and you think about the way that we talk through each of these and we unpack each of these, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. So I hope that this was useful. Obviously Alex and the Klue team will have these slides and hopefully send them out after with the recording. But anyway, hope that this little summary is valuable to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle, and really appreciate it. Hope that was helpful for everybody. We are just a couple of minutes over. So with that, let's wrap things up. But Kyle is more than open. Well, Kyle, tell me if I'm wrong here, but from what I know about you, more than open to connect on LinkedIn. So if you did want to toss him a follow, great content there and deeper insights on some of the stuff that he shared today. And then our team will be following up with the slides. And then before you hop out of this, we do have more sessions coming up, but the MCs do have an announcement, a message to say at the end of this conversation too. So really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kyle.
Bye, y'all.